All right, Jay. What Jay didn't know and why he was clasping his hands is we're recording now. So that's great. So we're here talking about the new podcast that we're going to launch together as a series. Jay, why don't you go ahead and to introduce it here? Then we're going to talk a little bit about what it's about.
So I'm really excited, Hunter. It's good to be working with you again on this stuff. This new podcast called Buzzkill is all about the things that nobody wants to or is allowed to make time to talk about, and the importance of those things like change management and information management and governance and all of those things that make your new technology capabilities successful, but nobody's allowed to do it.
Yeah, there's tons of things like this, right? Like end user adoption is a big thing, right? Like we used to measure end user adoption by how many people are actually using the software, but now organizations want to see productivity and they want to see people liking the software. IT wants to be, their value to be seen within the organization. And the only way for that to actually happen, right, is to have the time to actually train users to understand software and how users should be doing it. But that's just one example of a way that there's these expectations put on IT, but they don't always have the resources from the organization to successfully carry out the thing because there's kind of these traditional ways at looking at IT, the roles of the organization, and it's not just within user adoption. There's tons of different aspects where this can softly be applied. So we want to explore those, and the reason we're calling it Buzzkill is because there's all this cool stuff to talk about in the IT world, technology and productivity, AI and digital transformation and all this stuff. But you don't see people talking as much about these things because it's kind of like, oh, that's nice to talk about, but people say, well, nobody's in charge of that, number one, so it never happens, or number two, somebody wants to be in charge of it, but the organization doesn't want to make the shift towards that thing because it's really hard to measure the scale of it for the organization to see the success from it traditionally, but now it's more and more important. And so, yeah.
Yeah. Well, as a really good example. So I sell to the federal government. We have a records and information management platform built on top of Office 365. Well, we both do, right? And when it comes down to it, 9 times out of 10, the conversations we have with our customers are, this is really great. This solves our need for Office 365. We have no budget. And that's part of the buzzkill, right? Like, we know we have a problem we need to solve, but nobody's giving it the right level of attention. I am, as an individual, as a user, or as someone with that need, but my leadership doesn't quite understand, well, why is this that important? Why do we have to focus on that? The other part of that I think is worth talking about is where, IT used to be in a position of purchasing a piece of software. 3 to 5 years later, we'd do a major upgrade to that software, with security tweaks in the middle, and our project cycles aren't like that anymore. Office 365 is a fantastic example where organizations are buying it as an enterprise platform. It's no longer a point solution, and the updates to Office 365 are every other month. They're not 3 years out. And we're not just talking about the updates for SharePoint Online. We're talking about the updates for Office, for Exchange. We're talking about the updates for Teams. We're talking about each of those tools having their own release cycle with major enhancements coming out. And the concept that IT can just do the initial rollout and walk away, that it's not sustainable anymore.
Yeah, the idea is that this change can't be handled on with a project mentality. It's
That's right.
ongoing over time. And when we look at, for instance, what this COVID-19 crisis has brought to the forefront, it's highlighting this idea that IT is not just a line item expense. And for the bottom line, I think this is the real conversation, is that traditionally and now a lot of organizations see IT as an expense, something that they have to spend money on so that the organization can just, be able to have the functions they need to do their job. Especially as time is going on, it's much more than that. It's much more of an actual investment, because with the right tools and the right implementation, the organization can double or triple their productivity from the way that the users interact with things. Now, before, there's kind of this mentality that IT or technological tools may be able to fully automate something, but the concept that people just interacting with technology can make things run much more efficiently is somewhat new in the IT space. On top of that, you've got this idea that, again, well, I should really say that the COVID-19 crisis has really highlighted this, right? Like there's a lot of organizations that had teams. They're like, okay, we have to have this chat collaboration. People like it, you know, so they implement it. And some organizations, they get over adoption because the organization is not invested in the change management process for it. Other organizations, they get under adoption because either IT wants to turn it off for the organization because they don't have the time, right? Or the investment from the organization to handle the change management, or users just don't get that excited about it because they don't understand how it affects their day-to-day and can increase their own productivity. And
That's
what
right.
this crisis has highlighted is this is a real-world example where a piece of technology is actually saving the existence of companies,
Yep.
right? Well, I personally know IT admin who I had this conversation with, and he said he has gotten accolades from their top executives, from users that have come to him and said, listen, I don't feel like I would still have my job if you hadn't have moved us to Teams a couple of months ago. A couple of months ago, he implemented Teams, but he didn't have the resources and the
Right.
capability to get everybody excited about it. So people weren't even using it. Some people didn't even know they had it. And now it's saved their jobs, right?
Yep.
So just one example, just
Yeah.
one example of how reliable and how much IT can increase the productivity long term for an organization.
Yeah, I had a very similar conversation with a customer out in the uh, West Coast who they've rolled teams out a while ago, and but again, the adoption was poor because they didn't have buy-in from leadership to spin their cycles and get people up and running as much as they'd like to. But the minute that that city sent all their workforce home, 20,000 plus people, he was able to quickly point out, hey, here's a training activity, and here's a good use case for what this person's trying to do. And all of a sudden everyone's like, wow, this is, this was great. We're so glad that you were able to put this all up together so quickly. And he's like, yeah, it's been up for months. Let's talk about how to make this work long term. So that's part of the conversation, right? It can't just be a project mentality, and it has to be a long term thought process. How do we approach this as new updates come? How do we approach this as mission or business needs change over time? And that's the buzzkill. Is it's an ongoing conversation.
Exactly.
So
And my name is Hunter Wilson. I'm really looking forward to doing this series with Jay. He's Jay Leask. Sorry, Jay.
it's okay. It happens.
Jay Leask. It's gonna be a
Yeah.
great series, guys. Jay Leask.
So we've got our first episode coming up in the next week or so. I really hope you enjoy it. And of course, if there are topics you want us to cover, please reach out to us on Twitter, on the SPoT pod, or Jay at onthespot.tech. You can shoot me an email. We haven't got Hunter an email address yet, but we'll work on that in the future. Anyway, thank you so much, Hunter. Really looking forward to talking to you in the future. And to that 1, 2, maybe 3 people who give us a try on this intro video, I hope that we've piqued your interest.
Yep. Be safe, be well. I'm losing the ability to talk today. Be safe and be well with everything that's going on, everybody. Thank you very much.